Hello, my name is Theodore Abbott. I am the news editor for the Capilano Courier, also a CapU alumni. And I'm going to talk to you about some upcoming articles we have in the September trash issue. I should also mention that we have a zine coming out, which is going to be more oriented around activism and art and culture and calls to action and these kinds of things. So keep your eyes out for that. It'll be very exciting. The first article of note is all about international tuition increase. On his way out, former president of the university, Paul Dangerfield, broke a pretty significant promise that he had made, which was to keep international student tuition fees at par with domestic student tuition fees. He also ended his, he left his job essentially a year before the end of his term. And before doing that, at a Board of Governors meeting, he approved a 5% increase for international students, which puts a lot of financial pressure on them, causes a lot of financial uncertainty for international students, many of whom already have huge student debt. A lot of them are stressed out and working, even though they're only restricted to working about 24 hours a week. This was announced earlier this summer in July. It was announced via email, which a lot of students aren't happy about. In order to express their dissatisfaction and their frustration with this issue and with this increase, the CSU, along with the student body, sent 432 letters to university administration, and it seems as though that might have sort of fallen on deaf ears because there hasn't really been any communication. Beyond that, it's also noteworthy to say that the university is not really being clear with whether there'll be future increases of this scale. Will this be a yearly thing? Will students have to start budgeting for a 5% increase year after year? There's sort of a lack of transparency there, and a lot of students are feeling as though they're being left in the dark. They don't know if the university is going to sort of flip on them, and obviously this causes a lot of financial stress. The provincial government has guidelines in terms of what sort of transparency needs to be followed by universities, and in the case of Capilano University, it's clear that they're not really following those guidelines as strictly as they should be. And this is part of what the CSU has pointed out in their dialogue with the university. So check out that article in the trash issue. We are going to be following up and continuing to report and follow this issue. Okay, next up is all about the new student employee union that has been formed at CapU. This past year, student employees decided to unionize because, well, for a number of different reasons. There's a bit of friction right now in terms of negotiating their new wages. Student employees at CAP have been making minimum wage for the last 2 years because minimum wage increased, but their wages didn't. So whereas a few years ago, you might have been making just like a few bucks above minimum wage, now you're just making straight minimum wage. According to the university, student employee incomes are supplementary and they're not actually primary incomes. And from talking to students, and as we highlight in this article, that of course is not the case. A lot of student employees rely solely on their income from the university. And so it's clear here that they see student labor in a different light as the students themselves. That quote is coming from the Move Up rep, Chris Scheer, who's been in dialogue with the administration, trying to figure out how to categorize the new student employees within the union and also how they'll go about increasing their wages. If you happen to be a student employee, we would love to hear from you. Please send us a DM. If you want to comment on this ongoing issue, definitely reach out, and we're going to be continuing to cover this issue as it develops and as it goes forward. Transitioning now into the world of global politics, we have an article this month about how Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has moved to recognize Palestinian statehood, along with several other Western powers. Here at CapU, there have been a lot of protests in support of Palestine. And I think this is a crisis that means a lot to the student community and the student body. And so this recent announcement is kind of big news, especially for anyone who's been following this ongoing situation. Mark Carney's announcement, to a certain extent, is largely symbolic because it won't necessarily have a lot of impact for the people on the ground in Gaza day to day. but it does set the groundwork for future conversations around what people refer to largely as the two-state solution, which just means two independent Israeli and Palestinian states living side by side. This was an announcement that came out from the Prime Minister's office on July 30th, and what they said is that in the next session of the UN General Assembly, Canada will announce its recognition of Palestinian statehood. So there's a bit of hand-waving going on, but there is a meaningful bit of substance to this announcement. And it'll be interesting to see if Mark Carney decides to follow this up with more meaningful action, which is potentially likely the case if the situation in Gaza continues to intensify and continues to worsen. We're going to be, sort of continuing to cover the situation in Gaza as things get worse and worse, and also continuing to cover angles on this issue that are relevant to the student community and the student body here at CapU. Okay, so lastly, what is happening at the CSU? In the upcoming board meeting on August 29th, they are going to be reassessing and reevaluating a few topic areas. These include prohibited campaign locations, campaign ban during voting period, electronic devices in voting places, candidate loitering in voting places. Other potential changes that will be voted on are classroom speaking in elections, so like going and speaking in classrooms when you're running an election, and also academic standing requirements, which is basically like how well you have to be doing in your courses in order to run. So last year, a special general meeting was held with the unique purpose of passing an amendment to the election policy that allows students with a GPA lower than 2.0 to run in the elections. A vice president of equity and sustainability was elected, but only within the first few months of the term was he was removed. So the CSU has not released any information regarding why this seat is vacant or who is fulfilling the role at the moment. But unofficially, the reason why the director was removed has to do with a GPA lower than what CapU requires for a student to continue studying here. Every student at CapU pays for this organization to be able to run and to float. And so when it's kind of fluctuating and going through different changes, it's interesting to know what's up and what's happening. So please stay tuned for that. And we're going to continue following all of these stories. And like I said before, we also have a zine that's going to be a little bit more critical, focus on issues relating to activism and these kinds of things. So please keep your eyes peeled for our zine. And if you want to become a contributor, get in touch with the Capilano Courier and come say hi. For the Capilano Courier, my name is Theodore Abbott. I'm the news editor, and see you next time.